The hiss of a carbonated bottle being uncorked cut through the gentle hum of silverware and Sinatra playing low in the background. Candlelight flickered across the glass walls of Maison Aurelia, the kind of upscale Manhattan restaurant where no one raised their voice and a misplaced spoon could derail a reputation. At table 12, the tension was thick enough to slice with a bread knife. Lucas Hale, busboy, ex-teacher, single father, wiped his damp hands on his apron and moved quickly past the sleek mahogany bar, careful not to draw attention. That was rule number 1 in places like this. You didn't get noticed. But tonight, someone had broken that rule. In the corner near the private dining room, a small girl sat curled on the floor, blonde hair wild and tangled, arms around her knees, breathing fast, eyes wide, darting. Around her, a tableau of wealth and helplessness. 2 waiters frozen mid-step, a sommelier on the phone, and a woman in diamonds whispering, "Where is the nanny?" The girl's soft humming rose and fell in an erratic rhythm. She rocked forward, back, forward, back. Lucas stopped. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a storm. He turned toward the maitre d'. "Do we know her name?" The man flinched. "She's one of the Ward twins. Rich family. Don't engage. Security said they're calling someone." Lucas nodded, but only as a formality. His feet were already moving. "Sir," a guard snapped. "Step back. She'll bite." Lucas froze, mop handle still in hand, like a makeshift cane. He looked at the girl. Really looked. Her fingers tapped the floor with a rhythm only she could hear. Every time someone moved closer, her shoulders stiffened. He took a breath. "I'm not going to talk to her," he said quietly. "I'm just going to sit." He dropped to the floor slowly, deliberately, 5 feet away from her. He didn't make eye contact, didn't speak. From the side pocket of his cart, he pulled out a small travel bottle of dish soap and a plastic ring, his secret weapon, one he hadn't used since Becca's last meltdown at age 5. He dipped the ring in a cup of clean water, then raised it slowly and blew. 1 bubble, then another. The shimmering orbs drifted through the air, catching the overhead light like tiny stained glass windows. The girl's humming faltered. Her eyes locked on the floating bubbles, tracking them as if they were the only stable thing in the room. She didn't speak, but she stopped rocking. Lucas didn't smile, didn't react, just blew another stream, slow and steady, letting the silence wrap around them like a soft blanket. The restaurant was frozen. No one dared interrupt. Even the maitre d' seemed to forget he was supposed to be in control. From above, through a pane of one-way glass, Charlotte Ward watched everything. Her eyes narrowed behind her designer glasses, arms crossed tightly over her silk blouse. CEO of Ward & Sky Biotech, she had negotiated federal contracts, neutralized corporate mutinies, and been named to Forbes's Women to Watch list 3 years running. But none of that mattered now, because her daughter, her precious, unreachable Eva, was on the floor of a restaurant, calm for the first time in weeks, and the man who had done what no specialist could was wearing a janitor's apron and blowing soap bubbles. Charlotte blinked, suddenly aware of her clenched fists. She grabbed her phone and snapped a photo through the glass. Not of her daughter. Of him. "Mr. Hale," she said 10 minutes later, voice crisp and practiced. Lucas had just finished wiping down the marble tile near the girl. Eva. Her name was Eva. He'd learned it in a whisper from a terrified hostess. He stood slowly as Charlotte approached, heels clicking like gunfire on the tile. "I'd like a word. Upstairs." Lucas glanced at Eva, who now sat cross-legged on a cushion, holding one of the bubbles on her palm like a fragile jewel. He met Charlotte's eyes. Is this about me interfering? No, she said. This is about effectiveness. Upstairs, in a glass-walled office that overlooked the restaurant floor like a throne room, Charlotte shut the door and turned toward him. Who taught you that? The bubbles. Whatever that was. Lucas didn't flinch. My daughter. She has sensory processing disorder. Bubbles worked when nothing else did. Charlotte studied him like he was a puzzle piece that didn't belong in the box. You're not just a busboy, she said finally. Lucas shrugged. Not anymore. Used to be a teacher. Special ed. Took the night shift to be home for Becca. Charlotte sat slowly, like the chair was unsure whether to hold her. My daughter hasn't responded to anyone in 3 months. No play, no words. We've seen the best doctors. Lucas nodded. Maybe that's the problem. Silence fell between them. Sharp, but not hostile. She crossed her arms. I want you to work with her. He blinked. I'm a busboy. I can change that. I'm not looking for a handout. I'm not offering one, she said. I'm offering a job. Lucas paused, then said, I won't be watched. No cameras, no observers. And I won't be told what to do. Charlotte narrowed her eyes. You're in no position to negotiate. Then we're done here. He turned toward the door. Charlotte's voice stopped him. What color were those bubbles? Lucas looked over his shoulder. Blue, he said. Always start with blue. It calms the chaos. And then he left, a bottle of soap in one hand, and something else entirely forming in the quiet space they left behind. A beginning. The glass wall of Charlotte Ward's penthouse office reflected more than the city skyline. It echoed her, polished, precise, unreachable. Like the corner office itself, she was made of edges, expertly honed to command boardrooms and disarm senators. Yet tonight, long after the last guest had left Maison Aurelia and the dishwashers had gone silent, Charlotte stood in that room not as a CEO, not as New York's biotech queen, but as a woman who had just witnessed a stranger reach her daughter in a way she never could. She stared down at the security footage on her monitor. Lucas Hale, busboy, widowed, father to a 7-year-old, no criminal record, former special education teacher. His resume had appeared on her tablet within minutes of his departure, thanks to Greg Simmons, her ever-watchful PR strategist. Unqualified, Greg had muttered. Emotionally erratic background. His wife died 4 years ago. Leukemia. Stepped down from teaching shortly after. Doesn't scream stability, Char. Charlotte had waved him off. Did you see Eva? Greg hesitated. She was quiet. I'll give you that. But Char, we need professionals. What's your board going to say when they find out you're letting the busboy treat your daughter with soap bubbles? Charlotte didn't respond, because Greg didn't see it. Couldn't see it. Not like she had. Eva hadn't just gone still. She had breathed. For the first time in weeks, her daughter had looked at the world not like it was attacking her, but like it was trying to sing her a lullaby. That wasn't nothing. That was everything. Charlotte walked down the hall of her high-rise, past the gallery of black and white portraits, all cold and perfect. One of them showed her smiling at a ribbon cutting beside a U.S. senator. Another was from the Wall Street Journal profile. The woman who doesn't blink. She passed them without looking. Outside Eva's bedroom, she paused. The door was ajar. Inside, the room was dim, softly lit by the glow of a projection nightlight that threw moon and star shapes across the ceiling. The twin beds sat parallel, untouched. Only one was occupied. Rose lay sprawled on her stomach, mouth open, fast asleep. Eva's bed was empty. Charlotte stepped inside, breath tight. Then she saw it. A small figure on the plush window seat, knees pulled to chest, eyes wide open, gazing out into the city like it was another planet. Charlotte didn't speak. She had learned better. Instead, she sat in the nearby armchair, not too close, and watched. Eva blinked. Just once, and in her lap was the last bubble Lucas had blown, captured in a tiny plastic ring, now deflated, but cradled like treasure. The next morning, Charlotte canceled 3 meetings, moved her 2 p.m. call with Zurich, and told her personal assistant, "I'll be offline until further notice." Then she made a call she hadn't made in years. She dialed the number from the security report. "Lucas Hale speaking. I want to meet," she said. A pause. "Is this about your daughter?" Charlotte didn't respond. Lucas's voice was calm. "My lunch breaks are short. 1 o'clock. Hudson Pier." Click. He was already seated when she arrived. Hudson Pier wasn't a restaurant. It was a bench near the Riverwalk where seagulls outnumbered joggers and city noise felt muted by the water's hush. Lucas wore the same thing as the night before. Faded jeans, a neutral flannel. No pretense. No apology. Charlotte Ward, in tailored slacks, cashmere coat, and heels that cost more than Lucas's entire wardrobe, looked entirely misplaced. He didn't offer to stand, didn't rise, just nodded toward the bench beside him. She sat, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Lucas said, "You didn't come here just to thank me." "No," Charlotte replied. "I came to ask for something I don't know how to define." Lucas waited. "I've hired every expert, speech therapists, occupational specialists, neurologists. Eva doesn't respond to any of them. But last night, she looked at you. She calmed. That's not coincidence." Lucas looked out at the water. "She didn't respond to me. She responded to space, to stillness." "Then teach me," Charlotte said. The words escaped her mouth before she could restrain them. "Not just her. Me. Whatever it is you did. I want to understand it." Lucas finally turned toward her. His eyes were clear, not hard, but weighted. Children with Eva's sensitivities don't speak in language. They speak in air pressure, in body rhythm, in trust. And adults, we usually come in with too much noise. Charlotte lowered her gaze. "I'm not good at silence," she admitted. Lucas smiled, just barely. "I figured that much out in 5 minutes." Charlotte let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Would you work with her?" He shook his head. "I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed. I don't care. You will when your PR team starts writing headlines." "I already fired one," she said. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "I want you to see her once a week. Twice if you can. Just be with her, like you were last night." Lucas looked at the skyline. "I'll do it," he said finally. "But only if there are no cameras, no boardroom strings, no analyzing." Charlotte nodded. "And one more thing," he added. "What?" "I don't work for you." She looked at him, surprised. "I work with Eva. You're just lucky enough to witness it." She blinked, then nodded. For a long moment, they sat in silence. This time, it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Like something small, but sacred had just begun. That night, Eva drew a picture with crayons Charlotte didn't remember buying. A bubble. A blue one. Hovering over a stick figure. Charlotte stared at it long after Eva had fallen asleep. Because underneath it, in childlike scrawl, Eva had written a single word. Safe. And for the first time in years, Charlotte Ward wondered if maybe that word wasn't meant for her daughter, but for herself. Lucas arrived at the Ward penthouse on a Tuesday afternoon, that smelled of spring rain and sidewalk steam. He wore the same old leather boots, scuffed at the toes, and carried a cloth bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were 3 things: a small bottle of bubble solution, an unopened pack of sidewalk chalk, and a crumpled drawing Becca had insisted he bring. "She should know you have a kid, too," Becca had said, tapping the paper with her marker-stained fingers, "so she doesn't feel like the only one." Charlotte opened the door herself. No assistant, no nanny, no assistant to the assistant. Lucas raised an eyebrow. She shrugged, almost awkwardly. Trying something different. Inside, the space felt like a design catalog. Beautiful, minimalist, sterile. The kind of place where couches were more for display than comfort. But then Lucas noticed it. A paper taped to the wall by the kitchen island. A child's drawing. Blue bubbles. Everywhere. Charlotte followed his eyes. "Eva put that up this morning." He didn't smile, but something in his chest warmed. "Good taste in color." She motioned down the hallway. "They're in the playroom." "They?" "Eva and her sister Rose. I figured it was better than isolating them. Rose has opinions." Lucas chuckled under his breath. "I can handle opinions." "You haven't met Rose," Charlotte said dryly. He stepped into the playroom expecting noise, toys, maybe a splash of chaos. What he found was silence. 2 girls sat on opposite sides of a plush rug. Rose, clearly the twin with verbal dominance, had a tiara on her head and a clipboard in her lap. She looked up first, narrowed her eyes like a tiny courtroom judge. "You're the bubble man." Lucas bowed. "Guilty." Eva looked up too, just for a second, then back down to the crayon in her hand. But she didn't leave, didn't flinch, didn't shut down. Progress. "Do you always bring magic stuff in your bag?" Rose asked, rising and circling him like a cat. "Only when it's Tuesday," he replied. She squinted. "It's Wednesday." He leaned in, whispering, "That's the magic part." Rose considered this, then nodded. Approved. Lucas dropped to the rug, slow and easy, not facing either girl directly. He pulled the chalk from his bag, held it out without comment. Eva looked, not at him, at the chalk. And then, in a movement so tentative it made Charlotte hold her breath from the hallway, Eva crawled forward, took a stick of pale blue, and returned to her corner. Lucas didn't speak. Instead, he drew on the rug, or rather, on a small blackboard mat someone had left nearby. A single line, then another, a loop, a swirl. Eva mirrored him, color for color, shape for shape. A silent duet. Rose, bored by the lack of commentary, announced she was going to build a fortress out of couch cushions and disappeared into a whirlwind of throw pillows. Lucas kept drawing. After 15 minutes, Eva scooted 1 inch closer. Just 1. But it felt like a mile. Charlotte watched from behind the cracked door. She had read every book, hired every expert. None of them had done what this man had managed in 2 visits, without a single clinical term. She heard no questions, no instructions. No. "How do you feel today, Eva?" Just presence. And somehow, that presence was enough. After the session, Lucas stood in the kitchen sipping water from a glass he hadn't asked permission to use. Charlotte didn't mind. In fact, she was startled to realize she appreciated it. "You're quiet with her," she said. "She's louder than most people realize," he replied. Charlotte leaned against the counter. "You read her." "I listen." "Same thing?" Lucas shook his head. "Reading is for control. Listening is for relationship." She let that sit in the air for a moment. I didn't grow up with that, she admitted. Listening, feeling. I was expected to perform, then outperform. He nodded. Explains the suit collection. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she cleared her throat. Eva made something for you. He looked surprised. She did? Charlotte opened a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. On it was a stick figure with wild hair and a giant ring of bubbles. At the bottom, one word. Blue. Lucas stared at it, and for a moment his eyes glistened. Becca used to call me Blue Dad, he said softly. Said it was my color. Calm. Safe. Charlotte looked at him, something shifting in her voice. You talk about her like she's still here. She is, he replied, touching the drawing gently. Every time I kneel, every time I stay quiet when I want to fix something. That's Becca's voice, not mine. Charlotte didn't speak, because deep down, she knew what he meant. Every day she'd spent ignoring the part of herself that ached, that broke, that felt, was a day Eva had grown further from her. Maybe the real question wasn't why Eva shut down. Maybe the real question was, what had she been trying to shut out? That night, Charlotte tucked Eva in with slower hands than usual. She didn't rush, didn't bark instructions. She just sat beside her and whispered, You're safe. Mommy's learning. One step at a time. Eva didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. Across the room, Rose had fallen asleep mid-sentence, tiara askew, and on the floor beside Eva's bed, Lucas's chalk lines still shimmered faintly under the nightlight, loops and swirls in shades of blue. In his own apartment, Lucas sat by Becca's tiny drawing desk. He pinned Eva's picture beside his daughter's older ones. Side by side. Two worlds trying to meet. And he whispered, We're getting closer, kiddo. To whom he said it, even he wasn't sure. But that night, for the first time in years, he slept without dreaming of hospitals. The storm didn't start with a headline. It started with a whisper. A whispered photo. A whispered tweet. A whispered rumor that the reclusive CEO of Ward and Sky Biotech, the woman known for titanium deals and zero-nonsense boardrooms, had hired a busboy to help her daughter recover from a developmental episode. By Friday morning, the whispers had grown teeth. CEO's bubble man, inside the strange new therapy of Charlotte Ward. From brooms to breakthroughs, meet the former janitor with unlicensed methods. Exclusive, the man who blew bubbles and blew past boundaries. Charlotte saw the first article over black coffee and silence. The headlines hit harder than she expected, not because of the scandal. She'd weathered worse, but because of the photo they used. It was a shot taken through the glass wall of Maison Aurelia. Lucas, kneeling beside Eva, holding a plastic ring. She hadn't authorized the release. She didn't need to. Her world was a prism of mirrors. One leak, and everyone saw the cracks. Greg Simmons barged in without knocking. We've got less than 24 hours before this goes national. I thought we had more time, Charlotte murmured, scrolling the article. Greg snapped his fingers. Char, look at me. She did. You have a responsibility. A public-facing brand. Shareholders. The image of a vulnerable daughter being used in experimental, unregulated. He's not an experiment, Charlotte said firmly. Greg stared. You're defending him? He's the only person Eva's responded to in over 3 months. That doesn't make him qualified. Charlotte stood. Maybe qualifications aren't what she needs. Greg crossed his arms. You want to bet your company on that? The room fell silent. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. Lucas found out the way most men do. By accident. He'd just finished cleaning the counter at the Nest, a local diner where he picked up weekend shifts, when his phone buzzed with a text from a former student. "Dude, you're trending. Are you really Bubble Guy?" Below it, a screenshot of a tabloid article. His face, Eva's face. The words, "Single Dad Janitor," highlighted in yellow. Lucas went cold. He left work without clocking out. By the time he got home, a reporter was waiting on the stoop of his apartment building. "Mr. Hale, can we get a comment on your work with the ward heiress?" He said nothing, just walked past. But Becca was inside, eyes wide, tablet glowing with images and headlines. "Daddy, are you famous now?" He knelt in front of her, heart tight. "No, sweet pea, I'm just helping someone." She frowned. "Is she okay?" Lucas paused. "I hope so." Then turned off the Wi-Fi. And the world. By Saturday morning, the media frenzy had spread into parenting blogs, therapy forums, and even morning talk shows. Is the system too broken for kids like Eva? Why, a janitor's instinct may be more powerful than a PhD. The irony wasn't lost on Charlotte. The same world that praised innovation in tech now recoiled at innovation in healing. The board demanded a closed-door meeting. Charlotte faced 7 suited men and women across a long glass table, and for the first time in years, she felt like the outsider. "Charlotte," the CFO began gently, "this partnership of yours, it's unconventional." "So is autism," she replied evenly. An older woman leaned forward. "There are whispers of lawsuits, parents questioning our products, asking why your child gets special treatment." "I didn't hire a specialist," Charlotte said. "I hired a man who saw my daughter." "And what if he breaks something in her?" Charlotte stood. "Eva isn't glass. She's a child who needs space, not spreadsheets." The room stiffened. "You're overstepping," the chairman said. "I'm a mother," Charlotte replied. "There's no such thing." Lucas refused to answer media calls. He refused interviews, rejected offers for books and TED Talks. He kept his shifts, walked Becca to school, and stayed out of sight. Until Monday. When Charlotte appeared outside his apartment, dressed in jeans, hair pulled back, no entourage. Becca answered the door. "Are you the lady from the drawing?" she asked, pointing to Eva's picture still pinned to the fridge. Charlotte smiled. "Yes, I guess I am." Lucas emerged from the hallway, visibly tired. "This isn't your neighborhood." Charlotte held up a newspaper. His face was on the front. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't protect your privacy." He looked at her, jaw tense. "I knew there was risk," he said, "but I didn't think I'd become your symbol." "You're not," she replied. "You're my daughter's bridge." He exhaled. "What do you want?" "To ask if you'll still come." Lucas paused, then said, "Only if I get to walk through the front door. No side entrances, no hiding." Charlotte nodded. "Deal." That night, Eva waited by the window. When Lucas arrived, she didn't flinch, didn't run. She opened the door herself and handed him a crayon drawing. 2 stick figures, one blowing bubbles, the other wearing a crown. Underneath, friends. Lucas knelt beside her. "Still like blue?" Eva nodded, then reached for his hand. Charlotte, watching from across the room, felt something in her own chest soften, like a tight thread finally releasing. Let the headlines come, she thought. Let them write what they want. Because this small, quiet moment of connection was louder than all the noise. Lucas knew something was different the moment he stepped inside the ward penthouse that Thursday afternoon. Eva wasn't at the window. She wasn't curled in her reading nook. She wasn't hiding under the table or tracing chalk lines across the playroom rug. She was waiting in the middle of the floor, standing, holding something behind her back. He approached slowly, crouched down to her eye level. "Hey, Firefly," he said gently, the nickname he'd whispered just last week when she flinched from a flickering lamp. "Got something there?" Eva looked at him, then carefully revealed a piece of paper. It was another drawing, but this time the figures were more defined. Two people, one tall, one small, blowing bubbles inside a circle. Outside the circle were jagged red lines. Inside, it was calm, safe. Lucas looked up at her. "Is that us?" Eva nodded. Then, for the first time since they'd met, she opened her mouth. One word. Soft, barely above a whisper. "Circle." Lucas froze. The air changed. He felt it before he fully registered it. A stillness, like the moment before a note is played. He met her eyes. "What color is our circle, Eva?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Blue." It took everything in him not to cry. Behind them, Charlotte gasped. She had just entered the room with a tray of apple slices and tea, expecting silence. What she heard instead was her daughter's voice, gentle, fragile, and real. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Just lowered the tray and pressed a hand to her chest. Eva turned toward her and smiled. Later that evening, after the girls had gone to bed and the city had wrapped itself in amber dusk, Charlotte and Lucas sat on the balcony. The view stretched across the Hudson, golden light reflected off rippling waves, soft enough to make even a hardened heart soften. Lucas sipped chamomile tea from a mug that didn't match the rest of the set. Becca's doing, no doubt. Charlotte sat quietly beside him, her heels off, bare feet tucked under her. "I haven't heard her speak since December," she said at last. Lucas looked over, his face open. "She stopped talking after the gala," Charlotte continued. There was a guest, loud voice, strong perfume. Eva had a meltdown, and the press caught it. I tried to contain the damage, but she just stopped. Lucas didn't interrupt. "I blamed myself," she said. "Still do." "She didn't stop because of you," he replied gently. "She stopped because the world stopped listening." Charlotte blinked fast. "I don't know how to be a mother to a child. I don't know how to reach." Lucas leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe she doesn't need reaching. Maybe she needs joining." Charlotte looked at him. "You don't talk like a janitor. I used to teach kids who couldn't speak, but who said more with their eyes than most adults say in a lifetime." She nodded. "I see that now." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Why'd you really leave teaching?" Lucas exhaled. "My wife, Jenna. After she passed, everything changed. Becca was just 3. I couldn't stand in a classroom and help other people's children when mine cried herself to sleep every night. So I walked away, took small jobs, anything that gave me time to be home by bedtime." Charlotte didn't speak, but her silence was heavy with understanding. "She was lucky," she finally said. Lucas turned to her, surprised. To have a father who didn't try to fix her grief, just sat in it with her. Lucas looked down, his voice quiet. "Some wounds don't want fixing. They just want company." The air between them shifted. Not romantic yet, not quite, but charged with the electricity of mutual respect. Recognition. Two people who had worn armor so long they forgot what skin felt like. Charlotte glanced over, almost shyly. "Do you ever miss being part of the world you left?" He tilted his head. "Some days. Today?" He smiled softly. "Today feels like the beginning of something I didn't know I needed." Charlotte's breath caught, not because of what he said, but because, for the first time in years, Someone was speaking to her, and not her reputation. And she realized she liked how that felt. That night, Eva called for her mother. Not with words, not loudly, just a soft hum from her room. Charlotte went in immediately, sat beside her, and stroked her hair. Eva looked up. "Circle," she whispered again. Charlotte's throat tightened. She nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, we're in the circle." Then, from the shadows of the room, a sleepy voice piped up. "Can I be in the circle too?" Rose asked, rolling over. Charlotte laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. "Of course, baby." Eva reached for her sister's hand. For the first time since the silence began, the twins slept with their fingers laced. The next morning, Lucas found a note taped to his door. No name, no signature, just a piece of paper with a child's crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, 2 small, all holding hands inside a bright, soft blue circle. And in the bottom corner, in crooked handwriting, just one word: family. Lucas stood there, hand on the doorframe, heart aching in the best way. The healing had begun, and it was louder than the noise of the world. The woman came on a Tuesday. Her name was Dr. Melanie Keene, a child development specialist from Stanford, now one of Manhattan's most sought-after behavioral consultants. She wore a camel-colored blazer, crisp white blouse, and a pen clipped to her collar like a weapon of war. Charlotte had invited her, not out of doubt, not anymore, but out of duty. The board had raised their eyebrows high enough to touch their foreheads. Investors wanted reassurance that Eva's improvement wasn't just anecdotal, a licensed opinion. Charlotte had promised them she'd follow through. Still, as she walked Melanie into the playroom, she felt her stomach twist. The kind of twist that warned you something precious might be misunderstood. Eva was drawing with Lucas again, side by side. No words, just chalk, movement, and the occasional dandelion-shaped bubble that drifted toward the window. Melanie stepped into the space like a lawyer entering a crime scene, polite, composed, observant. Clipboard in hand, glasses perched at the tip of her nose. "Hello, Eva," she said sweetly. "I'm Dr. Keene. May I sit with you?" Eva glanced sideways, but said nothing. Lucas gave her a subtle nod. Eva resumed drawing. Melanie crouched slowly beside her. "I hear you like the color blue." Still silence. Lucas stayed quiet. He had learned Eva didn't need defending, just space. Melanie made a note on her clipboard. Then, gently, she began what Charlotte later described as a soft assessment. "Do you know how old you are, Eva? Can you point to the square on this card? Can you tell me how you feel when people talk loudly?" No response. Rose, who had been building a castle with pillows in the corner, stood and announced loudly, "She only talks to Lucas." Eva flinched. Lucas's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in awareness. The air had changed. He turned to Melanie. "She doesn't respond to tests." "I'm not testing," Melanie replied calmly. "I'm observing," and Lucas stood slowly. "She was speaking 3 days ago, whispered 2 colors, drew a family. Now she's gone quiet again." "She's processing new stimuli," Melanie said, rising. "Which is good. Silence is communication, Mr. Hale." "You're not listening," Lucas replied. Charlotte cleared her throat. "Let's take a break." Later, in the living room, Melanie reviewed her notes with Charlotte, while Lucas made snack plates for the girls. "She exhibits signs consistent with ASD," Melanie said. "Mild to moderate spectrum behavior. Some sensory defensiveness. Strong visual processing. Selective mutism under perceived pressure." Charlotte folded her hands tightly. "And your recommendation?" "Structured intervention. We start with applied behavior analysis, ABA, gradual exposure, task-reward cycles. I can bring in a team next week." Charlotte hesitated. "And Lucas?" Melanie smiled politely. "Mr. Hale is well-meaning, but he lacks training. We have to be careful about reinforcing codependency. It may look like progress now, but it's not scalable, not clinically repeatable." That last phrase struck Charlotte like a slap. Not repeatable. She nodded, thanked the woman, and saw her out. Lucas didn't speak on the elevator ride down, not until they reached the lobby. Then, quietly, "You knew this would happen." Charlotte turned toward him. I had to know what she'd say. Lucas nodded, jaw tight. "And?" "She saw checkboxes. You saw a person." He looked at her, not angry, but tired. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." He didn't wait for more, just turned and walked into the city, leaving Charlotte standing there in heels and indecision. That night, Eva didn't draw, didn't speak, just sat on the window seat, fingers curled around the edge of her shirt, eyes dull. Charlotte sat beside her. "I brought someone today," she whispered. "And she made you small again, didn't she?" Eva didn't answer. Didn't need to. Charlotte rested her head against the glass. "I'm learning," she said. "I won't get it right every time. But I see you, Eva. I promise I see you." Still silence. But this time, Eva leaned gently against her shoulder. Lucas didn't sleep much that night. He sat at the kitchen table with Becca's drawings scattered around him, staring at Eva's crayon note, the one with the word family in the corner. The next morning, he showed up at Charlotte's door. No appointment, no protocol, just purpose. Charlotte opened it, surprised. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I'm here to ask for one thing." She waited. "Give her the choice," he said. "If you bring in therapists, fine, but don't make her a subject again. Don't strip away the little light she's just started to shine. Let her have her circle. Let her choose who gets to be in it." Charlotte looked at him, really looked, and nodded. "You'll stay?" she asked softly. Lucas's voice caught. "If she wants me." A voice behind them whispered, "I do." They both turned. Eva stood in the hallway, small but certain. Then she walked to Lucas, placed her tiny hand in his, and said just one word. "Blue." It started with a ripped seam. Lucas had come straight from the diner, still wearing his grease-stained apron and smelling faintly of coffee and lemon degreaser. He didn't plan to stay long, just to drop off a set of books Becca wanted to share with Eva. But when Charlotte opened the door in sweats and bare feet, hair up in a messy twist, everything felt strangely soft, domestic even. "Hey," she said, her voice less composed than usual. "Hey," he replied, holding up the books. "Becca wanted Eva to have these. There's one about a kid who finds a talking raccoon in a laundromat." Charlotte chuckled. "Eva's going through a small animal with secret powers phase. Perfect." As he turned to leave, she hesitated. "Actually, would you stay for tea?" Lucas blinked. He'd never heard her sound unsure before. "Sure," he said. They sat in the kitchen. No polished wine glasses or catered hors d'oeuvres, just mugs of Earl Grey and the low hum of Eva and Rose playing upstairs. The tension between them had changed. It wasn't romantic, not yet. But something unspoken had rooted itself deeper since Eva had whispered blue after the therapist left. Lucas sipped quietly. "You look tired." "I am," Charlotte said, "but not the kind of tired that sleep fixes." He nodded. He knew that kind. There was a long pause. Then she asked, "Do you know what it feels like to live inside a reputation?" Lucas tilted his head. No, but I know what it feels like to live under one. She looked up, surprised. My wife's family always thought I wasn't good enough, he explained. Blue collar, didn't go to grad school. Jenna defended me, but after she died, the silence from their side of the family was louder than the funeral music. Charlotte traced the rim of her mug. People think I'm cold, too polished, that I built walls to keep them out. Lucas said nothing. She looked at him. But the truth is, I built them because once, when I was 15, I let someone in, a teacher. Lucas's brows furrowed. She held up a hand. Not like that. Nothing illegal, nothing actionable. But he praised me, not for my grades, not for my looks, for my ideas. Her voice dipped, softer now. For the first time, I thought I was more than my family name. I started writing poetry, staying late to show him essays. I didn't realize he was shaping me, not mentoring, not guiding, shaping, grooming, in a way that was emotional, psychological. Lucas's chest tightened. Then one day, Charlotte continued, he said something too intimate, not sexual, but violating. I told my mother. She told me to be flattered. A silence fell between them, heavy and unblinking. Charlotte looked down. That's when I learned. Feelings make you vulnerable. Walls make you survive. Lucas reached across the table, his hand resting gently over hers. She didn't pull away. Thank you for telling me, he said. I never have, she admitted. Not to anyone. Lucas looked at her. Not the CEO, not the mother, not the woman who hosted galas and ran boardrooms, but the girl behind all of that, still holding her breath from a moment 15 years ago. You weren't weak, he said. You were betrayed. A tear slid down her cheek. She let it fall. Upstairs, Eva traced a chalk circle around her bed, while Rose narrated a grand story about bubble dragons and invisible maps. For the first time, Eva didn't flinch when her sister laughed too loudly. She didn't curl into herself when the window rattled. She was starting to feel safe. And safety, Lucas had once told Charlotte, was the soil where voices grow. Back downstairs, the kettle whistled softly again. Charlotte wiped her cheek and smiled, embarrassed. Sorry. That got heavier than expected. No apology needed, Lucas said. You're allowed to be human. I forget that sometimes. He nodded. I used to forget too. Then Becca would pull me into a pillow fort and hand me a plastic tiara. Charlotte laughed, a full, lovely sound that hadn't been heard in that kitchen since her husband passed. Lucas stood and rinsed his mug. As he turned to leave, she called out, Lucas? He turned back. Do you think I'm capable of real connection? He stepped closer. You already are. You just have to stop asking permission to feel it. Then he left, leaving Charlotte in a silence that didn't feel empty, but healing. That night, she wrote in her journal. She hadn't opened it in years. Beneath the date, she scribbled one line. He didn't flinch when I showed him the scar beneath my tie. Then she put down the pen and walked upstairs to check on the girls. Eva was asleep, arm curled around a raccoon-shaped book. Rose had kicked off her blanket and was mumbling something about bubble castles. Charlotte stood in the doorway for a long moment, then whispered, Safe. You're safe. This time, it was her own voice she needed to believe. Lucas hadn't touched the drawer in 3 years. It was the third one down, right side of his nightstand, the one he always reached for in the dark when Becca had a nightmare and needed tissues, or when he couldn't sleep and fumbled for an old paperback to distract himself. But tonight, something tugged at him. Not sadness, not nostalgia, a kind of ache that didn't ask to be fixed, only acknowledged. He opened the drawer. Inside, a bundle of letters, bound with twine, edges softened by time. All of them written in the months after Jenna died. None of them mailed. They were addressed to her. Lucas picked one from the middle, dated 9 months after the funeral, and opened it. Jenna. Today, Becca asked if she should call her blanket Mommy because it hugs her back. I smiled. Then I cried in the shower. She still asks for you in her sleep. Not like before. Not screaming. Just asking. Like she still expects you to show up. I didn't know it would be this hard to keep smiling in front of her. Or this easy to lie. I keep saying, Mommy's watching. But even I don't know if that's true. Is it, Jen? Are you watching? Because if you are, I could use a sign. Or maybe just a moment where I don't feel like a half-person pretending to be whole. Love you. Always. Even in the silence. L. Lucas folded the letter and sat back. There were no tears. Not anymore. Grief had aged into something quieter. Something that lived beside him like a roommate who no longer needed conversation. But that letter, that ache, reminded him why he had built his own life around gentleness. He wasn't trying to fix broken children. He was trying to honor the woman who had taught him how to listen to them. The next day, he brought Becca to the Ward penthouse for the first time. Charlotte met them at the door, barefoot again, this time wearing jeans and a faded Eagles t-shirt that Lucas hadn't expected, but definitely noticed. Becca held her daddy's hand like a little diplomat. "Are there snacks inside?" she asked without ceremony. Charlotte smiled. "We've got cookies and grapes and little cheese cubes shaped like hearts." Becca lit up. "I love rich people." Lucas laughed. "Becca." "What?" She grinned. "It's not rude if it's true." Inside, Eva was waiting. Not by the window this time, but at the entrance of the playroom, holding a small yellow note in both hands. She looked at Becca, then stepped forward and offered it. Becca opened it. Inside was a drawing. 2 girls sitting side by side, and above them, the word, hello. Becca looked up. "You made this for me?" Eva nodded, and for the first time, Becca didn't fill the silence with words. She just held Eva's hand and walked into the room. Like she belonged. Lucas and Charlotte watched from the kitchen, their mugs warming their fingers. "They're good together," Charlotte said, almost surprised. "They don't know how to be anything but honest," Lucas replied. Charlotte turned to him. "You always speak like that, like you're writing the world a poem." He chuckled. "Maybe I am." She smiled, but then her face grew thoughtful. "Do you talk about her?" she asked gently. Lucas didn't need clarification. "I do," he said. "Not every day. Not always out loud. But yeah, she's part of the air." Charlotte nodded, staring at her tea. "I used to think grieving had a schedule, like quarterly reports. You get through the sadness, hit acceptance, and move on." Lucas looked at her. "It's not a ladder. It's a circle." She glanced up. "Some days you're fine," he said. "Other days, you're back in the moment you lost them. You're just older now, better equipped to hold the memory without shattering." Charlotte swallowed hard. "I never cried for him." Lucas tilted his head. "My husband," she said. "I cried during the funeral speeches, but not for him. Not really." Lucas stayed quiet. "I think I grieved the man I thought he was as more than the one he became." It was the first time she'd said that out loud, and it didn't feel cruel. It felt real. Lucas reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a folded page, yellowed at the edges. He handed it to her. She hesitated. then unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the handwriting. A few lines in, her face changed. "This is a letter I wrote to Jenna," Lucas said. "Years ago. I never mailed it, but I think you needed to read it more than she does now." Charlotte read the last few lines and let the paper fall to her lap, hand covering her mouth. "I don't know if anyone's watching me," she whispered, "but I know someone finally sees me." Lucas didn't reply. He just sat there. And in that silence, Charlotte realized something. She didn't feel the need to fill it. Later that evening, Becca and Eva built a pillow fort under the grand piano. Rose crawled in and promptly declared herself the bubble queen of the East. Charlotte peeked in. Becca pointed to her. "That's the royal assistant. She makes snacks." Charlotte gasped. "Excuse me?" Eva giggled. It was soft, small, but it was laughter. Real laughter. Charlotte turned to Lucas, who stood in the doorway with a gentle grin. "She's laughing," she whispered. Lucas nodded. "Let's just not scare it away." And for the first time in a long, long while, Charlotte let herself laugh too. The day started with spilled orange juice and ended with a ghost. Lucas hadn't seen her in years, not since the custody hearing. But there she was, sitting at table 3 of the diner he worked every other Saturday, wearing designer sunglasses indoors and stirring her coffee like it had personally offended her. "Lucas," she said as he approached, her voice a low, practiced drawl. "Still mopping floors, I see." He froze for a half-second, then smiled like it cost him nothing. Melissa, Becca's mother, Jenna's sister, his former sister-in-law, and the one person on earth who could still cause his hands to tremble. He set down a menu. "Didn't expect to see you here." She slid off her glasses. "I was in town. Thought I'd drop by. Imagine my surprise when I saw your face behind the counter, like something out of a sad country song." Lucas didn't rise to it. "What can I get you?" She smirked. "Answers, but I'll settle for eggs over medium and rye toast." He turned to leave, but she called out softly, "You always were better at running than talking." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. When he returned with her order, she leaned forward. "I hear you've been spending time in a penthouse," she said, "with a billionaire widow and her 2 delicate little girls." Lucas didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "Not gossip," she added. "Just community whispers. Manhattan's very chatty, Lucas, especially when someone like Charlotte Ward lets a man with no background checks tuck her daughters into bed." He leaned closer. "Careful, Melissa. That sounds like slander." "Oh, please," she chuckled. "I'm not here to attack. I'm here to observe. You've never observed without destroying." She tilted her head. "That's unfair. I helped Jenna through her worst panic attacks. Paid her rent once when you couldn't make the bills." Lucas's hand tightened around the coffee pot. "She was my sister. She was your project," he said evenly. "And when she died, you tried to make Becca yours." Melissa sat back. "I tried to protect her from instability. You tried to buy her with promises you never kept." The table fell silent. Customers buzzed behind them. Dishes clattered. But at table 3, the past pressed down like weight on glass. Finally, Melissa leaned forward again. "You don't belong in Charlotte Ward's world. Eventually, someone will remind her of that." Lucas met her eyes. "Maybe, but it won't be you." He finished his shift without saying another word to her, but her presence lingered like a stain. That evening, Lucas arrived at the Ward penthouse later than usual. The air felt different, stiffer. Charlotte met him at the door with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked. She stepped aside to let him in. "Can we talk for a minute?" Not a great sign. The twins were in their playroom. Becca sat cross-legged between them, reading from a picture book about moon bears and their magical umbrellas. Lucas followed Charlotte into the study. She closed the door. Then arms crossed loosely. "A woman came to my office today," she said. "Said she's Becca's aunt." Lucas's stomach dropped. "Melissa," he muttered. Charlotte nodded. "She said some things about your past, about your wife, the custody hearing, accused you of using emotional leverage with vulnerable women." Lucas closed his eyes for a moment. She always did know how to sound credible. "I don't want to believe her," Charlotte added quickly. "But I need to ask, for my daughter's safety." Lucas looked up, and something in his face broke. Not with anger, not with offense, but sorrow. "I understand," he said softly. "You should ask." Charlotte hesitated. "Is any of it true?" He nodded slowly. "Yes and no." She waited. He drew a breath. "After Jenna died, I was drowning. Becca was 3. I took jobs, janitor, dishwasher, busboy, anything that let me be home when she needed me. Melissa thought that made me unstable. She filed for custody, claiming I couldn't provide stability. I fought it. I won, barely." Charlotte's brow furrowed. Why would she fight so hard for custody? Lucas looked down. She wanted a second chance to raise a child right. Jenna always said Melissa treated motherhood like a redemption arc. I didn't want Becca to be someone's penance. Charlotte sat slowly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want that chapter to define me forever." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Did you ever manipulate people to keep them close?" Lucas blinked. "I don't know how to manipulate, Charlotte. I barely know how to ask for help." The room was still. Then Charlotte reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it. Lucas recognized it instantly. His old letter to Jenna. "I read this 3 times today," Charlotte said. Every word felt like something I've never heard a man say aloud. She looked at him. "And I decided that if a man can grieve with that much honesty, he's not a danger to my daughters. He's a mirror they didn't know they needed." Lucas's throat tightened. "You're welcome in our circle, Lucas," she said. "But don't ever lie to me again, not even by omission." "I won't," he said. "Not ever." Later that night, Eva and Rose fell asleep curled beside Becca in a blanket fort. Charlotte stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. Lucas stood behind her, hands in his pockets. "She always shows up when things are good," he said quietly. "Melissa," Charlotte nodded. "Then we'll just have to be unshakably good." He smiled. "That a CEO term?" "No," she replied. "That's a mother term." They stood there for a moment, watching the girls breathe in rhythm. Then Charlotte whispered, "If you're going to stay in their lives, you need to be steady." "I will be." She turned to him, looked him in the eye, and for the first time didn't seem afraid to be seen. The chandeliers glittered like stars trapped in glass. Charlotte Ward hadn't hosted a benefit gala since her husband's passing. For 2 years, the annual event had been quietly postponed, replaced with generic press statements and charitable donations wired behind closed doors. But this year, she'd brought it back, and the city took notice. A ballroom in Midtown, filled with Manhattan's elite, philanthropists, politicians, tech moguls in velvet blazers, and actresses in gowns the color of crushed pearls. Cameramen lined the entrance, reporters whispered theories, and somewhere amid the buzz, Charlotte stood with both feet planted and both daughters nearby. Eva clung to her hand like it was an anchor. Rose twirled in her dress like a satellite in orbit. Lucas stood beside the girls in a plain black suit, that somehow made him look more grounded than the tuxedos around him. He wasn't wearing a name tag. He didn't need one. Everyone knew who he was now. The Bubble Man, someone whispered near the champagne table. The one who got her to speak. Lucas pretended not to hear. He didn't like being stared at, but he didn't run from it either. Because tonight wasn't about him. It was about Eva. Charlotte crouched beside her daughter. "You don't have to go on stage if you don't want to." Eva looked up, then, slowly, nodded. "I want to," she whispered. Charlotte blinked, stunned. That was the first full sentence she'd spoken to her in public. Lucas smiled gently. "I'll be right behind you." Eva took his hand and held it tight. Inside, the crowd hushed as Charlotte stepped onto the stage. A single spotlight bathed her in gold. For a moment, she simply stood there, the applause quieting, the silence stretching. Then she spoke. "2 years ago," she said, "I stopped hosting this event because my husband was gone. I thought I'd lost the ability to lead with heart." She paused. "But someone reminded me this year that healing doesn't mean returning to who you were. It means discovering who you still are." A soft murmur of assent rippled through the audience. Charlotte turned slightly. "And tonight, I want to introduce someone who reminded me how to listen, not as a CEO, but as a mother." The spotlight shifted. Eva stood at the edge of the stage, hands trembling slightly. Lucas knelt beside her and whispered something. No one heard what, but Eva nodded, then stepped forward. She didn't speak into the mic. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into her little purse and pulled out a small, round bottle and blew a single bubble. It floated into the air, delicate, shimmering, silent, then popped. The room was still, and then came the applause. Not loud, not wild, but warm, tearful, real. Charlotte lifted Eva into her arms and kissed her temple. Lucas stood back, watching like a man seeing a painting finally complete. Later, as the music swelled and guests clinked glasses, Charlotte walked out onto the terrace with Lucas. The city lights stretched below them like a galaxy. "I was terrified," she admitted. "That she'd freeze, that people would laugh, that I was using her for a headline." Lucas shook his head. "You gave her a moment to be powerful. That's love." Charlotte turned to him. "What about you?" He looked puzzled. "What about me?" "You've stood in the shadows for weeks, guiding, not claiming. Why?" Lucas shrugged. "Because I'm not the story. She is. You are." Charlotte stepped closer. "But what if you are part of the story now? Not just as a chapter, but as a co-author?" Lucas looked at her, really looked, and she saw the question in his eyes. Then Eva's voice echoed softly from inside. "Daddy." Lucas turned sharply. Charlotte's breath caught. Eva stood by the door, sleepy-eyed, and she had said it. "Daddy." One word, and it split something wide open. Lucas knelt, arms out. Eva ran into them. Charlotte watched, tears streaming freely now. Makeup be damned. This wasn't about blood, or history, or titles. This was about love that had proven itself true. Love that had built itself not in grand gestures, but in bubble wands and bedtime chalk. Back inside, Melissa stood near the bar, holding a flute of sparkling cider and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her plan hadn't worked, and she knew it. She turned to leave, but Charlotte stepped into her path. "I know what you tried," Charlotte said calmly. Melissa lifted a brow. "I don't know what you mean." "You used your sister's name to poison something sacred." Melissa's smile tightened. "And what exactly is sacred? Your affection for a busboy?" Charlotte smiled. No, she said. A little girl's first word in months. A man's quiet devotion. The feeling of safety. Those are sacred. Melissa blinked. Charlotte leaned closer. And here's the thing about sacred things, Melissa. You don't touch them with dirty hands and expect them not to shine. Melissa didn't reply. She didn't need to. She'd lost. Not publicly, but completely. Outside, Lucas stood beside Charlotte as the final guests drifted out into the night. Eva and Rose were asleep on a couch inside, curled beside Becca like puzzle pieces finally at rest. The night air smelled of roses and city wind. Charlotte looked up at Lucas. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" he asked. "That I'll mess it up." Lucas took her hand. "We both will," he said. "But we'll also keep showing up." She nodded. "Then let's show up," she whispered. He squeezed her hand, and for the first time the city didn't feel so cold. The sky above Central Park was soaked in orange. Golden hour stretched lazily across the trees, touching everything with a soft, forgiving light. Horse-drawn carriages clopped slowly along the curved path. Joggers passed in quiet pairs. The city, normally loud, unapologetic, felt like it too, had exhaled. Lucas sat in the back of a red wagon, legs stretched, hands resting on his knees. Becca sat to his right, her curls tucked beneath a wool hat. Eva nestled against his left side, quietly drawing with her finger on the foggy window of the wagon's side panel. Rose leaned into Charlotte's lap, already asleep. It had been a long week, but the good kind of long. The kind that fills a soul, not drains it. "Remember the first day we met you?" Becca asked, chewing a licorice twist. "You were covered in syrup and sadness." Lucas laughed. "And you were covered in sass and syrup." Charlotte looked over, smiling. "You forgot the bubbles." Becca grinned. "Oh yeah, you blew bubbles like some kind of janitor wizard." "Busboy wizard," Lucas corrected. Becca nodded solemnly. "Right. Sorry. Busboy wizard of emotional rescue." Charlotte covered her mouth to hide the laugh. "She's not wrong." Lucas tilted his head. "If I'm a wizard, does that make you a queen?" Charlotte looked down at Eva. "No, just a mom who finally learned how to kneel." There was a long, full silence after that. Not awkward. Just real. As the wagon turned past the lake, Lucas glanced at the girls. "You know," he said softly, "none of this was supposed to happen. I was just supposed to wipe tables, maybe sneak you extra napkins." Becca tilted her head. "But you stayed." Lucas looked forward. "I didn't know how not to." Charlotte placed a hand over his. "Sometimes, the best families are the ones that find each other by accident." He turned to her, searching her face. "Is that what we are?" She didn't look away. "No, not anymore." He waited. Charlotte smiled. "We're not an accident. We're a choice." Those words settled into the moment like snowflakes on still ground. Soft, but permanent. As the wagon slowed near a street corner, Lucas noticed an old man sitting on a bench. He was blowing bubbles from a plastic wand, letting them drift lazily into the air. A little boy beside him clapped and laughed. Lucas watched them, his eyes reflecting the scene like a mirror. "You okay?" Charlotte asked gently. He nodded. "I'm just remembering something. Tell me." Lucas looked down at his hands. "Before Jenna died, we talked a lot about what love would look like if she couldn't stay. I asked her what she wanted Becca to remember most." Charlotte leaned in. She said, "Not my face, not my clothes. I want her to remember that no matter how quiet the world gets, there's always someone willing to blow a bubble and wait." He paused. "Back then, I thought it was a metaphor." And now? Charlotte whispered. He looked at her. I think maybe it was a promise. As night fell, they returned to the penthouse. The girls were tucked in. Becca read to Eva in bed, while Rose clung to a stuffed rabbit they'd named Sir Snuggles. The apartment was quiet, lights low, city far away. Charlotte stood by the kitchen window, pouring tea. Lucas joined her. For a moment, they just watched the skyline. Do you think we'll get it right? She asked. What? This. Us. Family. Lucas thought for a moment. I think the people who ask that question usually do. Charlotte smiled softly. I'm still scared. So am I, he admitted. But every morning I wake up and see 3 little girls in my hallway, arguing over who gets the last pancake. I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She placed her mug down, turned to him. You never asked for this? She said. No, he replied. But I was listening when it called. Charlotte stepped forward and rested her forehead against his. Their eyes closed, and nothing else needed to be said. Later that week, Lucas took the girls to the park. Just him in the wagon. He packed juice boxes, apples, and, at Eva's request, the little bubble kit that started it all. They set up on a grassy patch beneath a tree. The girls laughed and played, and Becca gave an impromptu speech about the importance of proper bubble-blowing technique. Then Eva, quiet, patient Eva, reached for the wand. She dipped it in the soap, breathed deep, and blew. 1 bubble, 2, 3. They danced in the air, swirling in sunlight. Lucas sat back and watched them rise. Charlotte arrived moments later, wearing jeans and a soft navy coat. She walked up behind him and placed her hands on his shoulders. You look like a man who finally believes the ground won't fall out from under him. Lucas tilted his head back to meet her eyes. That's because I believe in the people holding me up. She bent down and kissed his forehead. You're not just part of this story, Lucas, she said. You helped write it. The final bubble rose high, a perfect globe of light, and burst in silence. But what remained was everything. Where in the world are you watching from? We always love hearing where our stories are finding their way, whether it's a small town, a quiet porch, or somewhere halfway across the globe. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to Soul Moments Story, where every tale is a gentle reminder that love, kindness, and second chances still matter. Thank you, truly, for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take good care of yourself and of those around you.